In today's video, we're going to be talking about more Modern Horizons 3 cards. Most of these are actually from story articles that Wizards themselves will put out, but there's also some more from the leakers, so let's dive into it. And thanks so much everyone for being here. As always, if you do like the video, please hit that like button and subscribe, and then click the bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos are posted. But yes, we've got more Modern Horizons 3 cards to talk about, many of which are Eldrazi. There are some actual story articles that have put some of these Eldrazi out. Interestingly enough, it looks like they've gone back to like the Battle for Zendikar era with some of the stories that were written, and then sort of given maybe names or faces to Eldrazi that were just generic enemies back then. But yeah, so we're gonna jump right into it. I'm not gonna waste anybody's time. And I don't know, spoiler season does start pretty soon at this point. It's gotta be maybe next week, I think, is the official spoiler season, although we've seen so much of the set spoiled already. But I think there's obviously still some excitement to come. We're just going to dive into it. And of course, any of the leaked photos, I mean, there's always that caveat that they may not be real, but I mean, the leaker's been accurate with everything. So I think that's kind of a moot point at this juncture. Either way, I just always like to say that. So let's start off with Devourer of Destiny. This is 5 and 2 waste creature Eldrazi. You may reveal this card in your opening hand. If you do, at the beginning of your first upkeep, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top of your library, exile the rest. When you cast this spell, exile target permanent that's 1 or more colors. Definitely an interesting effect. Certainly, it's not the first time we've seen cards that have things they do if they're in your opening hand. Obviously, Gemstone Caverns, the Ley Lines, Once Upon a Time. But this one, I mean, you look at the top 4, you exile the other ones, you put one back. I guess it does sort of give you, like, fixing to maybe get more specific to what you need. And then, of course, when you cast it, exiling a permanent. Not the most incredible Eldrazi card I've ever seen, but it's not terrible either. Having access to some more powerful things is great. It's just, I don't think it does a ton. Not a bad card. Probably would see play in Commander in some cases, given the, you know, the name, the fact that it is an Eldrazi and the fact that it has more utility, but I don't see it being massively impactful in Modern. I just think some of the other Eldrazi you can cast that cost around the same do more. But, I mean, who knows? It does say exile target permanent, so it is a way to get over some stuff, and you can reduce the cost. So, it's a wait-and-see approach on that one, I think. Breaker of Creation. This is 6 and 2 waste creature Eldrazi. When you cast the spell, gain 1 life for each colorless permanent you control. It has hexproof from each color and Annihilator 2 and is an 8/4. So when I first saw this card, I didn't think it was all that great, but then a couple friends I have who actually play Eldrazi pretty consistently pointed out how not only are lands considered colorless permanent, so you're going to gain a good amount of life just for casting it, but it's just generally speaking not that hard to really benefit from this effect. And you know, the Annihilator 2 is great. The hexproof from colors is also great. It can do a lot, and it doesn't cost, you know, extravagantly more than your other Eldrazi while being a pretty solid option. I mean, if you have ways to reduce this and can bring it out for 5 or 6, certainly you can, you know, really kind of maximize it. And it's not the easiest thing to get over, especially with Annihilator. Of course, you know, it has only 4 toughness, so, you know, there are ways to maybe pop it, but it's a pretty solid card, especially at uncommon. I do think it's a solid option for, you know, Eldrazi to have access to. Corrupted Shapeshifter. Not too much to say on this guy. It's 3 and a blue creature Eldrazi Shapeshifter with Devoid. It has no color. As it enters the battlefield, it becomes your choice of a 3/3 creature with Flying, a 2/5 creature with Vigilance, or a 0/12 creature with Defender. It doesn't do a ton for you in terms of advancing any game states. However, it is nice that it has that versatility. I do suppose that in some circumstances you might be nice to have the ability to put that out, but for 4 mana, there's definitely better ways you can use that, and there's even better Eldrazi cards that kind of do similar things. So I would say this one's kind of a bit of a miss from me, but it's a cool concept at least to have the ability to do different things. Kozilek's Unsealing. It has everybody talking. This card is crazy. It is 2 and a blue enchantment with Devoid. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4, 5, or 6, create 2/0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice this creature, add colorless. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, draw 3 cards. So, first of all, for an uncommon, this card's extremely powerful. Someone pointed out how you can use this with things like Affinity, which is interesting because, you know, or not Affinity, I'm sorry, the mechanic where you, I think maybe it's Convoke, where you tap 4 mana. I don't know, there might be some combo lines there that you can make work. I do know that regardless, being able to continuously put out these tokens is in essence reducing your costs. And if you do have ways to use these tokens, like I said, with things like Convoke, you can tap them, play something, and then they're still out, so you can sack them for other stuff, and you keep getting tokens as you play stuff. So it's a very, very interesting card, but it's really powerful. And obviously being able to draw 3 casting creature spell mana value 7 or greater is not too shabby. That's really good hand advantage, and getting these bigger creatures, getting their cost down, is certainly something that the deck specializes in. So I think you're going to see Kozilek's Unsealing having a very big impact in Eldrazi. It is a pretty damn powerful card in every way, and the cost is, you know, kind of minimal considering the potential reward. Wumpus Aberration is 3 and a green devoid. When you cast this spell, if colorless mana wasn't spent to cast it, target opponent may put a creature card from their hand onto the battlefield, and it has trample. So it's a 6/6. You obviously want to use a colorless to put it into play. It's not that great by current standards, but I guess, you know, it's definitely a decent card in drafting formats, because, like, that's a 6/6 with trample, and if you can get that out and actually do some, you know, some damage with it, I think beyond draft, it's not that great. It doesn't really do a ton, but it is certainly a neat card from, you know, the design perspective. So there is that. Before we move on to the non-Eldrazi stuff in this video, just let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think so far. We know there's more Eldrazi coming, obviously, and a lot of them may be pack filler, but I think given the popularity of the archetype and the deck as a whole, it's worth at least covering, because who knows, there may be some gems, some diamonds in the rough, if you will, for those cards. So I'm just curious what people's thoughts are on them, and whether or not you guys think they're actually going to be, you know, good, bad, etc. But that's kind of where we're at with the Eldrazi. And there are a couple other cards here worth mentioning, one of which is Tune the Narrative. This is 1 blue instant. With draw a card, you get 2 energy counters. Very, very solid card overall. I like that energy counters are making a comeback, and there's definitely a good assortment of them for all of the colors based on what we've seen so far. This is just a solid card that does a good bit for you, and I think is obviously going to be more potent in constructed 60-card formats, but still, being able to have a consistent way to not only replace itself, but get energy counters for a low cost is definitely good. It's a solid card. Limps the Impossible is 2 and a red, and got some absolutely sick artwork here. This technically does fall into the Eldrazi category, but it's also not requiring Eldrazi in any way, which is why I didn't really count it there. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. At the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, put them into your grave, then create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn for each card put into your graveyard this way. Those tokens have sacrifice this creature, add colorless. So not bad. A combination of like Ren's Resolve with that impulse draw, but also the ability to put them back if you don't use them, which can actually be beneficial if you have stuff that you want like in the graveyard. But getting those extra tokens, this is a pretty solid card. You know, overall, it's not, you know, it's not necessarily as good as a Ren's Resolve per se, but it does give you, you know, it's 3 mana for 3 cards, plus the ability if you don't use them to get some extra resources. So it's not bad. Having that extra mana is definitely not something to kind of shake about. I think a card like this would obviously be really good in standard at the very least, because you have the ability to get, you know, extra mana off of it. But alas, it's, you know, it's not standard legal. So obviously it's kind of just a hypothetical situation. We've got Jolted Awake. This one is 1 white sorcery. Choose up to 1 target artifact or creature in your graveyard. You get 2 energy counters. Then you may pay an amount of energy equal to its mana value. If you do, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield. It also has cycling 2. This is potentially really solid. I know white has a lot of cards that do bring things back, but not for 1 mana. Obviously, you do have to have the energy counters, but if your deck is playing energy counters, you can make much stronger use of this. It's definitely a card to keep an eye on. It's a strong common, in my opinion, and does have, you know, some potential, like I said, index where energy counters are, where you can consistently make them and utilize them, and I do think that's a fun mechanic as a whole. So just sort of worth bringing up, I think, despite being a common. And finally in this video, Wheel of Potential. It looks like we're getting a full cycle of quote-unquote reserve list cards with energy counter mechanics, so it's kind of interesting. And I think there's probably one we haven't seen revealed yet. I think it's the white. But I'll have to double check as I go back through and continue to sort through the cards we haven't covered in videos yet. This one is 2 and a red sorcery. You get 3 energy counters, then you may pay X energy counters. Each player may exile their hand and draw X cards. If X is 7 or more, you may play cards you own exiled this way until the end of your next turn. So obviously a play on Wheel of Fortune. You're at minimum going to be able to have, you know, everyone may exile their hand and draw 3. So you can certainly use this in red to like get extra card draw if you need it. The only downside, of course, being that is that you can't force everyone to exile their hand and then just draw 3, which would be a good way to like slim everyone's hand size down. probably be a little too powerful, though, all things considered, at least in Modern. But if your deck is built around energy counters and you have consistent ways to get them, you can definitely utilize this to get some good hand refreshing, and being able to play your own exiled cards if X is 7 or more is a little added plus that we don't, always see with these wheel-type cards. So overall, I think it's a solid card. I like the design of taking the reserve list cards and kind of giving them a different approach mechanic, as much as I wish they just get rid of the whole thing and reprint the cards. Either way, it's nice to see energy counters getting some actual support. We know there's going to be a deck as well for energy counters, so there's a lot of support coming out for that mechanic. And if you're, if you're a fan of that, I think there's probably reasons to be optimistic. But I think it's a good card. I definitely think it does have some potential, depending on the deck and build. That's going to do it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.